So what even is the difference between Broadway, off-Broadway, and off-off-Broadway? Hi, I'm Chad Barnier, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk about all things musical theatre. If you love musicals as much as I do, or I mean, more or less, it doesn't really matter, please consider subscribing. It makes me happy to know that there are people that enjoy what I enjoy, because I'm a very narrow-minded human being. Now, as someone who lives on the other side of the world from the majority of the musical theatre community, if you can't tell from my accent, I live in Australia. A lot of the musical theatre world revolves around New York in America, or the West End and those types of areas. I am in neither of those locations, so it actually took me a while to figure out a lot of the musical theatre lingo when I started to get into musical theatre. So I thought I'd break down one of the questions that I had when I started getting into musicals, and that is, what is Broadway? What is off-Broadway, and what's off-off-Broadway? Okay, so Broadway theatre, also known as just Broadway, refers to theatrical performances performed in professional theatres located in the theatre district in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. Along with London's West End Theatre, in the English-speaking world, Broadway theatre is widely considered to represent the highest caliber and highest level of commercial theatre in the world. This includes plays, musicals, and actually sometimes even concerts. Okay, so that's great. What about off-Broadway? What's the difference between that and normal Broadway? And that's a great question, and it all comes down to capacity. Theatres are classified by how many people you can fit inside them. Okay, that didn't sound that great. Broadway theatres each have 500 or more seats. And currently there are 41 theatres that classify as a Broadway theatre. The smallest Broadway theatre is the Hayes Theatre, which is currently housing What the Constitution Means to Me, a play that's up for a few Tonys this year. And that has 597 seats. And the largest Broadway theatre is the Gershwin with 1,933 seats and is home to the musical Wicked. Off-Broadway theatres have between 100 and 499 seats. They also have to adhere to a few different union specifications, and off-Broadway theatres are less or fewer than 100 seats. This actually hasn't always been the case. Previously, regardless of the size of the theatre, you were considered a Broadway theatre if you were inside the Broadway box, which was from 40th Street to 54th and between 6th and 7th Avenue, including Times Square and 42nd Street. The change to that definition happened after a one-day strike in 1974. This change to the contractual definition of off-Broadway really benefited the new off-Broadway theatres that satisfied that 499 seat criteria, because it was much cheaper to pay the Actors Equity actors on their minimum salary as opposed to the Broadway standard of paying your actors. And an example of an off-Broadway theatre that appears in that Broadway box would be the Laura Pels Theatre or the Theatre Center. The whole off-Broadway movement started in the 50s as a way to fight the commercialism of Broadway and to give new up-and-comer poets and playwrights a chance to hone their craft and introduce new shows and pieces of art to the community. Some of the most famous and well-recognized Broadway shows actually got their start in off-Broadway. It's a great way to test a show, test an audience. Some of those examples include Little Shop of Horrors or Godspell, Avenue Q, Putnam County, Spelling Bee, In the Heights, Hamilton, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So many of those shows wouldn't have had that opportunity to hit Broadway without first developing their show in an off-Broadway scenario or building a fan base and a hype and a movement around their off-Broadway run first. So here are some quick fun facts I found out while doing some research on Broadway and off-Broadway theatres. So the longest running show on Broadway is The Phantom of the Opera, which opened on January 26, 1988 at the Majestic Theatre. That is 31 years. The next two longest running shows are Chicago in 1996 and The Lion King in 1997. So nowhere near 31 years. A lot of Broadway theaters are actually owned and operated by the same few companies, including the Roundabout Theatre Company, the Schubert Organization, and the Nederlander Organization. So the Schubert Organization owns 17 theaters, which is over 20,000 tickets. That's a lot of bums and seats. The Nederlander Organization owns 9 theaters, which is almost 14,000 1,000 seats. If you're planning a trip to New York City and you want to see as many musicals as you can, there are currently 26 Broadway theaters playing host to musicals, not to mention all of the off-Broadway and off-off-Broadway productions. Out of all the Broadway theaters, only one, the Circle in the Square Theater, is actually privately owned. The Richard Rodgers Theater has housed 11 Tony Award-winning Best Plays and Best Musicals, which is more than any other theater, including Guys and Dolls, Damn Yankees, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, 1776, Chicago, In the Heights, Hamilton, 9, and that's just a few of them. In 1967, the Shubert Theater played host to the very first network television broadcast of the Tony Award, which previously were only held in hotel ballrooms. I hope you found this interesting. That's a lot of info about Broadway and off-Broadway, and I hope I answered that question for you. If you did find it fascinating and you enjoy musical theater, please consider subscribing. This is a really fun new project for me to be making these videos about musicals. I'm going to leave you with a question of the day, and that question is, have you seen a Broadway or an off-Broadway musical? I'd love to know what that is. Let me know in the comments below. For me, I've only seen one. I saw The Lion King when I was there, 6 years ago, and I was only there for a few days. So that's my only answer. I wish I could answer with a lot more, but what have you seen on Broadway? Let me know.